Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on license exempt supply. We're excited to have you all here today so we can share what that means for renewable energy generators. My name is Mark Loveridge. I'll be your host today for the session, and we'll be taking questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to drop them in the Q&A box as we go. I think one of the other housekeeping things, which is a bit odd, is we can't see your videos and microphones are muted. So unfortunately, we have to resort to text and typing. But yeah, if you can pop your Q&A in, the team will answer those questions as we go. And anything more specific, or if we think is relevant and is coming from many people, we'll pick up those questions and we'll answer those at the end. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Trifina Dudley. Trifina is one of our PPA specialists here at Renewable Exchange. And since joining Renewable Exchange in 2024, Trifina has become a trusted partner for generators navigating the PPA market. She's executed over 80 PPA agreements, guiding clients through the process with clarity and confidence, ensuring they achieve their best outcomes in what can often be a rather complex landscape. My name is Mark Loveridge. I'm the commercial director here at Renewable Exchange. I joined in 2024 with over 20 years experience across energy, clean tech and biotech. My energy journey began at Ecotricity in 2004. I worked on merchant wind power projects and new business development. And at Renewable Exchange, I have the privilege of leading a team of experts who help our generators unlock more value through our platform. I'm delighted to be here today and look forward to sharing our thoughts and listening to your questions. So before we dive into today's topic on license exempt supply, let me just give you a very quick introduction to Renewable Exchange, which I think probably helps set the landscape. We were founded nearly 10 years ago with a clear mission to bring greater transparency and efficiency to the way renewable energy is traded in the UK. Since then, we've grown to become the UK's leading PPA platform, having successfully executed over 2,700 power purchase agreements. At the core of our platform is a data-driven competitive tendering process that connects generators with a broad network of off-takers, giving them greater market visibility, stronger pricing, and full control over when to go to market and who to contract with. Our daily site-specific forecasts provide real-time, asset-level insights, enabling generators to make informed, timely decisions that maximise value. We've also developed the Lightning PPA, a fully digital contracting solution that removes unnecessary admin and legal costs. It accelerates execution and helps generators secure value faster and with greater confidence. So we're all here today to talk about license exempt supply. And put simply, license exempt supply is a way for renewable energy generators to sell electricity directly to a customer without needing a full supply license. It's made possible by a set of government rules that have been around since 2001, where there was a mechanism that allows renewable generators to supply electricity directly to customers without holding an electricity license. More recently, you might also hear it called peer-to-peer, as in 2001, under Ofgem's regulatory sandbox, there was an opportunity for smaller generators and consumers outside traditional PPA or sleeving schemes. But the big news came this year when Ofgem approved an important change to the market, known as BSC modification P442. Now, this change means that electricity supplied through license exempt supply no longer has to pay certain environmental levies, sometimes referred to as non-commodity costs. And these can include the feed-in tariff FIT, renewables obligation RO, and contracts for difference CFD. And the impact of that really is that there can be savings within that PPA and that agreement between those different parties of between £42 and £55. And that's typically split between the generator, the off-taker, any TPI and supply customer. And Trifina will talk a little bit later about what that looks like. But for me to kind of help better understand what this looks like, I think we've got to kind of dive into how a non-commodity costs ordinarily managed in a licensed environment. And it's important to note that Ofgem have oversight of all non-commodity payments. So you as a generator will typically sell your power in a PPA. And you'll sell that power to a licensed supplier. And sometimes we call a licensed supplier an off-taker, but for the purposes of this, because of the license exempt, we thought it was easier to call them a licensed supplier. But when you talk to us about PPAs, we may reference as an off-taker. What that licensed supplier does is they bill the energy consumer. and they'll bill for the commodity costs, that's the energy costs that you've generated, and the non-commodity costs. So as we've already said, the CFD, the RO, the FIT, and all the other sort of grid charges. The energy consumer will pay their bills to the licensed supplier, and the licensed supplier will then make the non-commodity payments. So they'll go to the electricity system operator, the distribution network operator, the national grid electricity transmission, and so on and so on. The supplier will also pay you your commodity costs, and they'll pay you your embedded benefits as per what is defined within your PPA. There's a slight difference here if you have a CFD. CFD levy payments are based on the volume of supply that the licensed supplier makes, and they go to the low carbon contracts company. And then any under and over strike payments are made directly between the LCCC and the generator themselves. So as high level as we can go, this is kind of how it works at the moment and how non-commodity costs are ordinarily managed. What's different in license exempt is that exempt volume, so that volume that's supplied under the license exempt scheme, is taken out of that supplier settlement. And so a credit exists on the supplier side that can be redistributed. So you'll see the change here is for the license exempt element of supply, the energy consumer still gets billed, but within that bill, there's no charges for the non-commodity costs we've mentioned, and the supplier no longer has to pay those non-commodity costs out to those different organisations we mentioned. So in short, license exempt supply opens the door to more direct energy transactions within the market, providing savings for supply customers and additional revenue for eligible generators. So I'll move on and talk a little bit around eligibility. So there's 4 key things that we tend to look at. One is renewable generation sites with a capacity under 50 meg that must also be connected to a distribution network. Second is license exempt. Doesn't apply to all your volume necessarily, depends on the size of the asset. But the key measure here is it allows for the supply of up to 2.5 megawatt hours per half hourly period, or 1.25 megawatt hours for domestic customers per half hourly period. The good news is all renewable technologies are covered: solar, wind, hydro, AD, etc. But one thing to note is sites not accredited, it's only applicable to sites not accredited under the RO scheme renewables obligation. And the reason RO accredited sites cannot operate under license exemption is because the scheme requires power to be sold to a licensed supplier to issue and redeem ROCs. And this ensures regulatory compliance and prevents misuse or double benefit from subsidy mechanisms. As far as we're aware, there are absolutely no plans for that to change, but keep an eye on our feed in case anything comes up. And as with anything, there are always risks and there are always some considerations. Here we've tried to pull out kind of the top 6. Our team are always available to talk to you about this in a little bit more detail. But if I go through all 6 of these, one is there's no guaranteed upside. Your PPA is your fixed guaranteed value subject to the volume that you generate. Whatever is in your PPA for each megawatt hour that you generate, that's what you're paid, that's what you're guaranteed. The challenge is if P442 is ever suspended or removed, then that LES upside will vanish, it will disappear. So always be focused on what's your PPA, what are the terms, what are the value, what's the tenure of that particular contract. The other challenge is that if you were to sign for an LES scheme, which Trofina will talk a bit more about later, we have to match you up with a supply customer or customers through Elexon. And Elexon may well have a backlog at different times. So the pace at which you can get signed up and whether Elexon will stamp that and approve that is always a challenge. And Trofina will touch on that a little bit. Another is regulatory and licensing. Breaching that 2.5 megawatt hours or 1.25 megawatt hours in a half hourly period invalidates the exemption entirely. And the arrangement essentially becomes illegal unlicensed supply because it breaches that threshold that has been set. And there are lots of ramifications that Ofgem could follow up with, financial penalties, legal, criminal and otherwise. So we always recommend that you would seek your own independent legal advice if you wanted to understand that point a little bit further. Payment terms. Different off-takers have different payment terms for LES volumes. Trofina will touch on that a little bit later. It's a really key consideration for you. Legal entity as well. 2.5 megawatt hours half hourly total exempt cap is based on the ultimate legal ownership level. So if we think about how renewable assets are developed and operated, what you'll see a lot of the time in the market is those assets will sit under an SPV, a special purpose vehicle. And there may be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many there are, depending on the number of assets in these SPVs. And ultimately, they may roll up into a headco, or there's a legal ownership across all of them. License exempt supply has that cap, which we talked about, the 2.5 meg or 1.25 across that whole ownership structure. So if it were that first scenario, where it's multiple SPVs into one headco, you can only claim 2.5 meg per that headco or that ownership structure. You can't claim that 2.5 meg for each individual SPV if they all have the same ownership structure at the top. That is super important, because if you exceed that, you're then coming back to the regulatory and licensing issue, you're breaching, and then you're potentially at risk of other sort of activity from Ofgem and other organisations. Reputational one is interesting. We have different views from this from different counterparties that we speak with. I think one of the things is more of a sort of public perception around, by using license exempt, it could be seen as a lack of contribution to shared market infrastructure, potentially undermining ESG credentials and investor confidence. Now, that's entirely up to you and your strategy and what you want to do as to how you see that. And the lens is very different in a community space as it may be within an institutional investor space. But something for you to consider. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong. And then contracting, the supplier you sign your PPA with is the one who must manage any license exempt volumes. So when we come back to that kind of guaranteed upside, if we step back from all the license exempt piece, the most important thing for you is who are you putting that PPA or your asset with in your PPA, and then what are the terms that they could provide you with for your contracting. And so that's the bit I want to touch on for now. I'm now going to hand over to Trevina, who's going to talk a little bit about revenue potential for generators. So over to you, Trevina.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for that introduction. So Mark has covered the policy bit and eligibility for generators to go on license exempt supply. I will now discuss the more interesting part of this webinar, which is to do with revenue and how much you can earn from license exempt supply. Moving on to the next slide. There are 3 factors that you'll have to keep in mind while you pick your license exempt supply partner or the off-taker that you're going to work with. Your PPA provider, your PPA off-taker and the off-taker that you're partnered with to be a license exempt supplier has to be the same off-taker. So your PPA price will play a huge role on the total revenue that you get. Your PPA price is still going to be the major contributor to your revenue. So it is really important that you partner with the right off-taker who offers you a really good PPA price. And this is going to be the same for the entire duration of the contract. That is, if you're signed on a fixed price PPA, then that revenue will remain guaranteed for the entire period. What varies is the benefit share and the matched volumes. So benefit share, as mentioned already, the total benefit uptick from license exempt supply will be anywhere between £42 to £55 per megawatt hour matched. But this is shared between the generator, the off-taker, the consumer, and any other parties involved. Generally, we have seen a pass-through of 15 to 50% of this LES benefit to generators, which translates to about £5 per megawatt hour to £25 per megawatt hour. Matched volumes vary as well. This is your off-taker's ability to match your generation with consumption of consumers in their supply books. This will vary depending on your technology, your export profile, and the import profile of consumers in the off-taker's supply books. Again, this varies from 40% up to 100%. And from what we've seen in the market, if you have a base load asset like AD or hydro, it's much more easier for your off-taker to match you than a more intermittent generating asset. Moving on to the next slide, we'll see how this match works. So here is an example of how a solar site has been matched for 1 day. So this is the yellow spiky curve that you're seeing there is solar generation on a typical summer day. On the other hand, the blue line, the blue curve that you're seeing there is consumption for an industrial consumer. And as you can see, it's only the blue part that's below the consumption line that can be matched. The pink, the part that's filled in pink is excess, well, that's energy that cannot be matched. You will get paid for your PPA price for that part, but not the LES uptick. Even though it's in the interest of the off-taker to match 100% of the energy that you export, they are not always able to match this. And this is just for one particular site on a particular day. We will now look at how that might translate to when you're matched with multiple users in the next slide. So here we're looking at a solar site again. It's been matched with 3 different users, a factory, an office building, and a school. And the 2.5 megawatt hours, which is the maximum benefit match that you can have, has been matched between these 3 users. Let's say this is on a typical weekday, but if this is a weekend, the office and the school may not have as much demand as on a weekday, and you can see how it wouldn't be possible to match 100% of the export, but your off-taker will try their best to match as much as possible. And moving on to the next slide, we'll see how this translates to in terms of revenue. So here we're looking at a 5 megawatt solar site, and we are seeing we'll compare how 3 different off-takers have different types of license exempt supply offerings. We're keeping the PPA price at £80 per megawatt hour. This would translate to about £400,000 in terms of revenue from just your PPA for the entire duration of, for let's say, for a 1-year contract. And we're keeping it at round numbers to make this simple. And then we're assuming the total LES benefit that we're getting, the LES savings, as £50 per megawatt hour matched. And in this example, we're seeing a match rate of about 100%. This particular off-taker, let's say this is a off-taker who's able to do half-hourly matching at 100%. So we're assuming it's at 100% match, and the LES generator share of exemptions is 40%. And this would translate for a year, the total uplift would be about £100,000. As you can see, this is about 1/5 of the total revenue that you can get from the site. So it is really important that you get that you optimize the benefit that you can get from LES. We will now compare this with 2 other off-takers and their offerings. We're keeping the PPA price at £80 for off-taker B and C. For the sake of simplicity, again, we're keeping the LES exemption per megawatt hour as £50. The match rate varies here, as this is going to be the case in real life as well. 60% pass through by off-taker B, while off-taker C is only able to do a 40% match. Again, we're also seeing the benefit pass through to generators. Off-taker B is offering 35%, while off-taker C is offering 30%. This translates to revenue by off-taker B of £52,500 over a year. So as you can see, this is making a difference, and off-taker B is only able to give you 50% of what off-taker A is able to offer you on LES. So it is really important that you pick the right off-taker. While looking at these numbers, you might think it's pretty obvious that you want to go with the highest offering, but there are a few other factors that you need to keep in mind before you pick the right the off-taker that you want to go with, and we'll help you understand what this is. And this is where renewable exchange can add value. And how we do this is, as mentioned already, you will need to have a PPA in price. We help you get a PPA through our really competitive tender process. So once you tender the asset through the platform, we'll go out to the whole market. We have about 30 off-takers in Great Britain who are registered on our platform. So your site will get maximum visibility. And after the competitive tender process, we will present you with the results of the PPA, all the bids that you've received, alongside you will also get information on what percentage of benefits each off-taker is passing through on the LES, and also the potential match percentage for your particular type of asset, that is the technology type. And this is just based on historically how much an off-taker has been able to match in the past few months. And based on this, you will be able to understand what revenue each off-taker is able to offer you, and you can then pick who you want to go with. Again, it's not just the revenue that you will have to keep in mind. There are other factors that also will play into your decision making, which is in the next slide. You will see how the fact that, so as soon as you sign your PPA, you will then have to apply to Elexon to be a licensed exempt supplier. So for this, your off-taker is going to help you apply. And some off-takers have backlogs, so they're not able to send your application right away. So if you're signing up for your PPA and LES a couple of weeks before your start date of the PPA, your off-taker may not be able to help you with your LES benefits, pay those LES benefits right from day one of your PPA. So it is really important that you time your PPA a few months before you actually go your PPA starts. Again, Elexon approval is necessary for you to start getting paid for your for that LES uptake. So while some off-takers, the payment schedules vary because of this as well. While some off-takers are able to pay you a fixed pound per megawatt hour of LES matched benefits. So that will just get paid about 2 months after your actual export of electricity. Others may take up to 18 months to get this, to give you a payment for the license exempt supply bit. Again, your PPA payments will happen as usual. It's just the license exempt supply payments that will take place about 18 months after for some off-takers. The reason behind this is that subsidies such as FIT and RO, they get reconciled after 18 months after your actual export. So it takes that long for them to be able to calculate your benefits and pay you for it. So if your company or your organization is set up in such a way that you need regular cash flow, and if you're depending on this LES uplift for your in terms of your cash flow, it's really important that you pick the off-taker who makes payments closer to your export. As you can see, this is a fairly new product, and so the offerings vary considerably in the market. And there isn't much transparency around these offerings at the moment, considering how new this is. And this is where renewable exchange helps add value. We are speaking to off-takers on an everyday basis. So we understand the LES offerings that each of them offer and how this changes. An offering yesterday may be different from what we're getting, what they're offering today. So we help you make these informed decisions. We make the market transparent in terms of PPA and LES, and we help you make the best decision. I hope that was helpful. I'll now pass this on to Mark to go to the Q&A.
Thank you, Trifina. Really helpful. And I apologise. I think at the start of my phase, my camera seemed to have turned itself off. I was wondering why it wasn't blue. So apologies for that. But no, that was really insightful. We've had some fantastic questions come in. We've got a few minutes left on the webinar, so we'll just kind of tackle a couple of those. But please, be rest assured that we will follow up those personally. We'll also follow up with the slides and all the Q&A with the answers as well, so everyone will get an answer to the questions that are there. There is, if anyone does want any direct follow-up with Renewable Exchange, on this slide, there is our phone number, contact email address. You'll be able to reach Trafina or any other member of our team. As we've said, PPA forecasting, short-term utility PPAs, CFDs, corporate PPAs, ROC, REGO trading and advisory services, all areas that we can help. So I'm going to try and get through as many of these questions as I can. And Trafina, I may ask you to support me on a couple of them once you've been able to have a look at them. But yeah, question number one, which I think was pre-submitted, is if I change my base PPA contract off-taker before I receive my payment for LES, can I still receive the benefits, or do I need to remain with them? A great question. So LES agreements always align with the end of the PPA. So at the end of the PPA, if you happen to change off-taker to get a more competitive quote or bid, you will still get paid for the benefits from the previous off-taker as per the agreement that's signed. That agreement will live on, and you'll still be entitled to those payments. So I hope that answers that one. The next one is explain payment terms in more detail. Any other common settlement mechanisms, or is quarterly reconciliation the only one? So I think Trafina's covered this a little bit, and it does differ across off-takers. Some will look to front it, some will look until the reconciliation has happened. But essentially there are 4 non-commodity environmental levies, depending on kind of how you want to term them, that are avoided through the LES arrangement, the FIT, the RO, the CFD and the capacity market. Each of these subsidy payments are collected through consumer bills by suppliers, as we talked about, and the value of these support payments become known and then reconciled at different points throughout the course of the year. Most suppliers will provide a quarterly statement, giving an indicative overview of the benefits accrued, but these won't be settled until later in most of the cases. For a contract, for example, a contract starting in April 26 and ending in March 27, the FIT and RO payments avoided through LES during the contract won't be settled until November 26 for some off-takers. The CFD payments are settled more promptly, generally quarterly, and are paid 3 months after the previous quarter has closed. But we've seen payment terms vary hugely between suppliers. And it's something we can help you explore on a one-to-one level. What we expect over time is, as they become more aware of different offerings and the pressure to become more competitive, we'll probably see more competitive nature in terms of how these and when these payments are made. But that's kind of where we are at the moment. I think I answered this one earlier in terms of why exactly can ROC generators not benefit. Trafina, I don't know if you just want to kind of touch on that one briefly, and then hopefully we've got time for maybe just one more question before we have to close the webinar.
Yeah, okay. So how ROC subsidies are set up is that a licensed off-taker has to be able to purchase your power for you to be able to get paid for these ROCs. When it comes to license exempt supplier, you're essentially signing up to be a supplier without a license. And this takes away this part where you're exporting to a licensed supplier, rather you're exporting or selling directly to a consumer. So since that licensed part is gone, we are ROs, that is renewable obligation ROCs cannot be, if you're getting ROCs, you cannot be getting license exempt supply benefits. It's just the way it's been set up. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Trafina. That's really helpful. And I'll capture this last question. So an arrangement cannot be made between a specific chosen generator and consumer because Elexon decides who gets the exempt supply. Again, good question. So an arrangement can be made between a generator and consumer, but if you want to kind of participate in that settlement and some of the kind of LES values that come back, Elexon essentially rubber stamp it. And as part of this sort of P442 modification, there was also the ESNA set up, which was the Exempt Supply Notification Agent. And that's a VSC recognised party agent. And their role is to separate the metered volumes between licensed and exempt supply. So that essentially gives Ofgem and those within the market certainty that the licensed exempt supply and the licensed supply are clearly monitored. And so when we talk about kind of breaching that cap and making everything is within the realms of where it should be, Elexon have to basically authorise that, and that gives them the oversight and clarity so they can see what's happening. But we'll follow up with maybe a sort of more thorough answer after that. But yeah, I'm afraid that brings us to 11:30. Short and sweet webinar, but we didn't want to keep you on for an hour. As I said, we will share the slides with you. We'll share all the Q&A. There will be other webinars coming down the track, so please keep an eye out for those. We'll also send you around a survey to see how useful this was for you. That's super important because it helps inform us what we'll do at future webinars. But thank you for your time. Hope you found it useful, and look forward to catching up with you all soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.